Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jeff Burr with the Tattooed Spirit. We're moving along the second line of these major arcanas, these interpersonal influences that are affecting us and pushing us through our life. And we're getting to the 13th card, and there's a few reasons why 13 has been, in our culture, in many cultures, actually considered unlucky and unwanted. There are some buildings without even the 13th floor sometimes, to that extreme. That is the card that is represented by 13th, the scariest number, the scariest card, and to your subconscious, the scariest concept that you can possibly conceive of, and that is the card of change. That's the death card. That is what this card means whenever you see it coming into your reading, your spreads, your experience, in your meditations. What card speaks to you the most whenever you're coming into something that you are resisting is the change card. This is pretty much as we're exploring this second line of interpersonal changes every single step along the way, that whenever we get to this card, it is the death in our conscious experience of the world of our ego. Whenever we consciously understand that there are situations that are best understood and had whenever we remove ourselves from that part of ourselves that we recognize as separate than everybody else. If that was confusing to you, you can listen to it again. But it basically is the acceptance that we can let our ego go and allow our spirits to roam through this world, yet still confined by that sort of meat suit that identifies us as somebody else. Okay? This is the change. This is the card that initiates a new way of being by embracing the change, by dropping our ego sense of ourselves. This is about looking about ourselves and into ourselves in a brand new way. There's nowhere else to go on this second line other than to just have the full realization that who we've always thought that we were is no longer applicable. Mainly because of the hanged man that came just prior. The idea that the experience of life changes when we realize that we are now part of this huge conglomeration of other beings. Take it another step further. It is the loss of ego that is represented in this card. Some people call it transformation. That's a good interpretation for this card. I like the idea of liberation. I like the idea of liberating yourself from used to thinking of yourself as just so separate than everybody else. That's the whole meaning of this second line anyway, isn't it? We had learned that the last card of the first line is about just sort of mastering your environment, mastering the worldly beingness of willpower and success and victory. That's why we're here into the second line. That's why we're at this point whenever we recognize and we work with this particular card. Now we can recognize that there's change coming, and you can tell where you are on this scale of self-acceptance in your spiritual life by the different reactions of these four characters on this card that's being faced with this change, being faced with death. You have the king down here somewhere. That represents the rigid ego, the idea that everybody else is separate from me and I am here and this is how you know I'm me because we have nothing to do with each other. That king gets completely knocked off. You see his crown little and fell over. Rigid egos get stopped here. This is as far as they can go, not even to this stage. There's the priest. There's a priest character that is supported by his belief systems of just the structure of what he has taught that helps him through change. Those of us that believe the strong necessity of prayer and believing in a higher form of ourselves, some sort of God or universe force or something looking out for us, you can see how that is helped and structured in that particular character represented by the priest. You have the maiden, the woman in white, that represents sort of the innocence, sort of rigid but kind of turning away. You can get the idea of where as you grow younger and become more childlike, you become more accepting of this whatever change is coming. And that could be the change of the loss of your car, the loss of your pet, the loss of your relationship, the loss of your job, the idea that you're liberating from the past. So whenever you see this death card come up, I want you to feel as bad for whatever you can sense with the card changing as you do for the fall season, and how that represents all the death around the seasons of the natural world, knowing that there is inevitable winter and then the spring. This is a positive card. It has to have death. It has to have decomposition. It has to be making way, because there are new things always coming in for you. When this card presents reverse, this just means it's just it's a stuck in old habits and patterns. I stuck that together, habits and patterns. I made a new word there. But whenever this card presents like this, you can be shown, you can understand this card as just you not being willing to open up and release that which doesn't serve you anymore. And that's being stuck to your rigid ego, that belief system that you are separate than other people. This is such a wonderful card. It's 13, like I said before. It's considered the most unlucky number because it is said that Christ had died on Friday, which is why Friday the 13th is an awful date considered, by a lot of people. And I think actually I'm going to go through all of these cards at a later time or in another type of situation where I could go through just the numerology to be able to understand how these cards relate to one another. Because we have 13. You can see how this, just by the number 13, because all of these cards, all their numbers are so specific to us, a wonderful new understanding of a depth of this, of every position of this card. And we're all going to get into those eventually. But the 13, if you think about starting a brand new pattern, the way you welcome fall because you can't wait for this change of seasons and all the new flowers in spring, it breaks up the pattern of perfect 12, which is what we've sort of had here in this card here, the 12 card in the Hanged Man. 12 is considered like a perfect number because it's divisible by 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 6. Okay, which is the most of any other number. Here with 13, it's just divisible by 1 in itself, 13. So it's just, you can see how just in the number itself, it creates a brand new pattern of being. And that's exactly what happens whenever you begin to embrace and liberate all yourself from the past stuff to open up for new experiences. One more point on this card. This is a really fascinating point as well. When I learned this, I thought it was pretty cool how it falls right underneath the Lover's card. Now, I didn't know this for many, many years, but I had learned that back in Elizabethan England time, to have like sexual relations and to have that peak experience of an orgasm with someone, back in the day, that was considered dying. That was considered death. And it's very, very true that whenever you have that peak experience with somebody else, that's really only possible when you're in the type of romantic relationship or an other person relationship. You do lose in that moment of orgasm that sense of self. There are whole spiritual practices based and revolved around sex in and of itself for that peak experience of the orgasm, to totally lose yourself, to tap into yourself as pure energy, pure spirit, pure connectedness to the all that is. Interesting little fact. It brings new meaning that you can say, I died 3 times last night. But anyway, that is a wonderful card. When it comes up like this, you're resisting change. In the hypnotherapy office, in your own life, you can see how much your subconscious, 88 to 93% of your whole mind's power is resisting change. That's why this card is so wonderful. One quick story of the most really, really cool experience that I've ever had with this card was the client whose grandfather had died. Just so you understand how we're going to be getting into working with these cards once we get the understanding of them down. Had a really hard time with her grandfather dying 2 years prior. She just simply couldn't get over it. We got her very comfortable, very calm, very relaxed in that wonderful, meditative, hypnotic state. And we set her down on this sort of swampy ground, and she was really excited to lay into this death character for taking her grandfather. And whenever her subconscious provided this character coming through the swamp so that she can just make herself feel better by railing into how angry she is that he took her grandfather, the death character turned and she realized she saw her subconscious offered to her that her grandfather was in the back of the horse of death, just having the time of his life. And she said after she was crying and all. It was a wonderful, unbelievably emotional moment. That whenever her grandfather, that she could see that the grandfather was riding happily behind death, right on the same horse, said, "Why are you so upset? I'm having the time of my life." That's how your mind wants to work with you through these cards. And I cannot wait to get to that part. But first, we understand these cards. And next, we move into the final stage with temperance, how we can act like an angel in this world by sort of experiencing the victory of this inner self understanding of really why we're here, how we go about our life. We're going to get into temperance and what the temperance card, number 14, the end and the success of that deeper realm of understanding through the second line of the major arcana. If you don't have your cards, I'm telling you, go to tattooedspirit.com, hit the resources tab, get them delivered to your house so you can then lay these out for yourself and see what I'm seeing, see what everybody else is seeing, and how they relate to each other. We haven't even said about how these cards are related to the ones below them yet. And we have a lot of exciting stuff to talk about, but you're going to love the end of the second row in just a moment. Come on back for some temperance.